I always looked at it as having so much fun. I never worked a day in my life. I come from a very non-academic background. I was a municipal councillor I did 2 terms for 8 years. We weren't working as we are now off a smartphone or a pad or a laptop. Really didn't exist.
So the technology was in a different level back then.
It was just wildly different. Go back 55 years. My generation as well was working with a lot of people who'd come out of the Second World War. Transport generation, whatever, today, back to that time, just so they could spend a second just to sort of touch and feel what it is we were doing. That we always used to know that call meant we were moving. We were going on to the next assignment. I had the great pleasure of opening the Fairmont Waterfront Hotel. But the next really big opening was in Dubai.
So my next question too is, looking back, I'm talking about your journey to success. So what were some of the moments that you think it's really shaped your career?
I think having an opportunity to go and work in the Far East was first at the beginning. It was an opportunity presented itself, and I said yes. And because we haven't mentioned the effects on spouses and how disruptive it can be, and the company you're working with, are they going to support you? Are they? Because times aren't always great. Things do go awry, and if they do they have your back?
To analyze if the job is a good fit for you, and also to analyze and research about your company and the team you will be working.
You can only control what is in your immediate sphere of influence. Artificial intelligence is a great one. Being talked about so much now, but was it talked about so much 2 to 3 years ago? Someone stood up and very wisely shouted out, "Is there a 13-year-old in the room?" I thought, nailed it. It's just so nailed it. And if you can master nowadays some of those shorter term goals and really get them nailed down to achieve what you've got in mind, the longer term one, which you have less and less control over, will actually crystallize as you go along. If you look up the word to lead in the dictionary, it reads something to take someone by the hand and guide them.
I have the great pleasure and honor of recording the very first episode of the AD Show podcast, and today I have, in my words, a legend in the hospitality and tourism industry. I'm so honored to have Michael as very first speaker in the AD Show podcast. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. I know you are very busy, and thank you so much for taking the time to join my podcast. Michael, you have an impressive career spanning over 55 years in the hospitality and tourism industry, which is really blows my mind. Can you share your journey with us and what initially drew you to this field?
Share the journey. Oh, well, Alton, that really depends on how long you've got. But in the beginning, what started it all? And the truth is, it's hard to explain, because I didn't suddenly wake up one morning and say, I simply have to go into the hotel industry. It wasn't like that at all. And in fact, if it is like that for a lot of young people, then they're probably quite fortunate, because they've suddenly had this epiphany, this special moment, when they know exactly what it is they want to do. That happened in my son's case. He's a helicopter pilot. But I did not. I did not at all. It so happened that I came into contact with a group of people, my parents' age, who were in the business of developing and opening hotels in the United Kingdom, right? And it was a very different science then. It was a very different approach. But I thought to myself, well, you know, this is not all bad. This is not all bad. Now I have to explain. I come from a very non-academic background. I'm quite dyslexic, and I certainly was not going to excel myself or exceed at any great university. I was unlikely to go into a technical career or a legal career, because I didn't have what it took to be successful doing that stuff. So it had to be something which was totally different. And through meeting other people, as anyone listening to this podcast may well find themselves doing, you eventually meet some folk, and it's a common interest or bond develops, and you may not actually think, wow, that's what I want to do, but nevertheless the seeds are sown and the germ is sown, and maybe you're fortunate enough to have one of these wonderful holiday job experiences. And it doesn't matter on terms of the holiday job experience, because those experiences will tell you what you like doing. As every bit important, they'll tell you what was absolutely awful. And you've no wish to do that sort of thing at all. So scrub that off, take that off, and forget about it, move on. And that process of moving on, of course, whittles down the opportunities one by one. And you self-select after a while something you really want to do. And that's exactly what happened in my case when I got involved with these people who were working on these hotels. And what was interesting was it was incredibly people-focused. I wasn't required, as one wasn't then, to do rows and rows of numbers. We weren't working as we are now off a smartphone or a pad or a laptop. It actually didn't, funnily enough, really didn't exist.
So the technology was in a different level back then.
It was just wildly different. Go back 55 years. If you don't believe me, imagine you're in a car showroom and you're looking at today's cars. And you look at the dashboard of those cars and wow, I mean, it's impressive, right?
Yes.
Goodness knows how you ever start the damn things, but because you've got to wade yourself through, and I've done this not for a 1,500 page manual. And eventually you learn that if you press this button and all things are equal, something's going to happen in the engine department. Now go back to a car that was built 55 years ago and just look at that car. For many people, looking at a car built 55 years ago, they say, wow, however did that get on the road? I mean, how did anyone drive that thing? It's really weird, because they're so acclimatized to everything we have now. And so it was then that everything has moved generationally. Someone my age now had the massive acceleration of everything. We lived in a world now which has been the acceleration of everything. Our predecessors, of course, had steady, regular progress, and sometimes driven by the most dreadful circumstances, those progresses. But we have had the technology suddenly thrust upon us. And I always loved the remark. I was in a meeting not long ago, and do you know, everything was going wrong with this poor person's presentation. And it just wasn't coming together in terms of what they were trying to put on the screen and coordinating it with the laptop. And then someone stood up and very wisely shouted out, "Is there a 13-year-old in the room?" I thought, nailed it. Just so nailed it. There we were. I first started, I think, when I was doing my very first jobs. I was about 16, 17, just come out of school, summer holidays, the usual. Almost wish we could transport generation whatever today back to that time, just so they could spend a second just so touch and feel what it is we were doing. Pencil and papers were prevalent. The telephone was erratic and of course glued to the wall and through a curly whirly wire.
I feel like back then you had less sources, but you were doing more. But now I'm thinking about our time. I mean, now that we have all these amazing technologies, but I feel like we are doing less.
We had less rules. And of course, we probably didn't always behave very well, and we were certainly less disciplined compared to the young people today who, believe me, are actually very disciplined, and I watch them. And there are sort of rules for this and rules for that, and a whole lot of a massive amount of government from everywhere, and not just in this country, but in lots of countries. Well, we didn't have that. You took a chance and you did something, and if it didn't work, don't do it again. You learnt by sort of experiences, and there wasn't actually too many crashes and burns. It probably worked out. Things did happen quickly because there was no one to tell you not to. My generation as well was working with a lot of people who'd come out of the Second World War, and there was lots of issues obviously fell out of that. So there we were, and
the dynamics were very different than now.
A lot of new jobs for an emergent industry, and not really enough people to do them. I mean, if you look the part and you dress the part, you got the part. Whether you had the faintest idea, really, of the right or wrong thing to do, which led, of course, to over-promotion. And some people ended up by being massive successes, and other people didn't and just moved on to other industries.
And Michael, I'm thinking about, the times that post World War II times, you are talking about that times, and I can't imagine how different that time was comparing to now, because now I work in the tourism and hospitality industry, but when you first started, that was the time that the industry was being developed, and you are one of the architects of this, because you started at the time when the development was actually starting. Looking back, you opened too many hotels that are still today one of the most popular hotels in the market, and now young professionals are actually applying for jobs or students, and you were the one who opened many hotels in the different part of the world. So what motivated you to pursue such a diverse and dynamic career across various parts of the world, including North America, Middle East, and Asia?
I was part of a company which was expanding and developing in the 70s, new opportunities, 80s, 70s particularly. I'm thinking about late 70s. And the first opportunity I had, I was working in the UK to work internationally, ended up by myself working. Wasn't quite a direct route, but I worked in Thailand, opening a hotel in Thailand. And prior to that, I'd done a hotel which had gone through a totally major refit. It felt like a reopening. And it became slightly addictive because you develop some instincts relating to hotel openings, which weren't then in the precise manual form that they are now. Or of course you don't get manuals, but it's not recorded in the same way. And we were making, I won't say we were making things up as we went along, but that wasn't so far from the truth. That really wasn't. We were in parts of the country's world we didn't speak the language, probably not as aware of the culture as we should have been, and entrusted with these openings, largely because we brought a sense of some discipline, and we probably added some skill sets which then I say then weren't readily available, and we were packed and ready to go, and we just got on and did it. And once you started that led, after being in Thailand, to come back to Canada, to Vancouver actually. And that wasn't an opening. That wasn't an opening, but it developed a relationship with a wonderful group of people here in Canada. And then, as these things happen, and people who'd say they've got to plan their careers, yes, we all plan, but it's amazing how we get overtaken by events if we're in the fast lane.
Resilience.
Yeah. You just, of course, you try to be as organized as possible, and you have your personal goals and everything else. And it's probably a good thing that you do, because at least if you have your personal goals, you know occasionally what you're not achieving. But in the main, speaking of my generation, you just got swept up by events, totally swept up by events. And I'm sure that telephone had a certain ring. And we always used to joke that we always used to know that call meant we were moving. We were going on to the next assignment. Because properties were opening, indeed as they are now, but in a rather different way. Properties were opening, and they needed a point person for location. And if once you started on that trail, people said, well, this person can do this. And you found yourself then heading off somewhere else, and it was quite nerve-wracking, but it was wonderful sort of excitements here. I had the great pleasure of opening the Fairmont Waterfront Hotel, and that actually sort of developed in my mind, I won't say the textbook, but certainly a lot of the standards or the rules that one would live by for subsequent openings. Because after a hotel opening is a hotel opening, the scenery changes, the nationalities change and other things, but basically you still got to provide a room for someone to sleep in on the opening day and the necessary facilities to accompany all that. Having done it once, it just rolled over to the next occasion. The truth is, it was. We were nowhere near as organized as our young compatriots now.
So you were in Canada and then you received another opportunity and then you just
In Bermuda was the next one.
in Bermuda.
Yeah, in Bermuda, yes. And that wasn't an opening. That's where hotels come under the auspices of of a company, right? So you're representing that company, so you go where the hotels they've acquired. But the next really big opening was in Dubai.
And that was the first time you moved to
That was to the Middle East. Yeah, was to Dubai, and that was truly significant. Different in scale, different in culture, and
Weather is very different than Canada.
yeah, you can see we're sitting out here in the sun, and it's glorious. I love the heat. You know, and it would get obviously up to the high 40s at time, which most people would say unbearable. But what do they? Mad dogs and Englishmen out in the midday sun. So I guess we fell into that. But that was a very dynamic opening, because also very fortunate was when you were doing an opening, you need to look at the environment that you're going to do the opening in. If the environment is a positive one, if the business levels are going to be dynamic, it certainly helps the opening, because you know it creates the wealth which sustains forward movement in everything you're trying to do. And Dubai in the year sort of 2000, 2001, which was when I first went out there, was really a very rapidly changing. I mean, it still is rapidly changing, but then it was it was quantum. What you had one year was very different, and a year later you needed a map to find your way around. And that was enormously dynamic and of a great scale, and working with a wonderful ownership group who were incredibly supportive.
So my next question to you is, looking back, I'm talking about your journey to success. So what were some of the moments that you think it's really shaped your career?
I think having an opportunity to go and work in the Far East was the first at the beginning. It was an opportunity presented itself, and I said yes, and they said we'll have you, and that was amazing. And those opportunities later came up to bring me to Canada, and that set it on a whole new journey, and it was opportunity driven. I didn't sit there and say, wow, you know, in 6 months I think I should be working here, there and the other. The darn telephone went off, which we've joked about before, but the telephone went and you found yourself on the move.
I think there's one thing to mention. Sorry for pausing, but you have such a inspiring career. But when you say you received the phone because you were too good at it. You were great at your job that you received another phone, another opportunity to move on, right? So I think you are being too humble about your journey, but
there are people who are marvelous, and anyone watching maybe want to ask themselves this question: are you the person who would like to start an enterprise, build it up, and then hand it over to a supremely competent group who are going to manage and sustain it, and then move on to another opening? Or are you going to be part of the group that are going to take over from the group who've just done the opening, and then going to develop what they've done, grow what they've done, and set a path for that building that will obviously be its future? And everyone will have to have a think, well, I'm the starter sort of person, or no, that means too much moving around, there's too much family upheaval, because we haven't mentioned the effects on spouses and how disruptive it can be, and especially when you get into the area of children's education. When is it convenient to move? I mean, if you're moving a couple, shall we say they have very young children, for the very young children it's not particularly disruptive. But if those kids are teenagers and they have friends, and they're at that stage of their schooling, they would probably want a job which takes them to where they are maintaining something that started and developing it further. because then the family can settle down, kids can do the bit of their schooling, and so it's understated how important it is, the whole personal environment. That whatever the personal environment looks like, does it work? Does it work for the people involved? Because for one thing, from experience, if it doesn't work, trying to persuading people and having them accepting a job where then it puts them in an uncomfortable personal situation is usually a recipe for failure. And I can't speak too strongly against that, because when you make an appointment, you have to make sure that those vital people are comfortable with what they're going to be facing.
I understand that you had also some obstacles in this process, which we'll go into later on in the podcast. So can we say that moving abroad was the time you think that moving abroad really shaped your career?
Yeah, it actually just gets you out of your total comfort zone. Can you imagine you wake up one morning and you're nominally in charge, and you have to say, especially if the hotel's not open, well, just what am I in charge with? You look at maybe it's a building under construction, and you think, I'm going to turn that into a living, breathing hotel with wonderful people doing a job, offering hospitality. Really? Okay, right. So yes, of course it does. It changes you. Of course, it changes you hugely, and having done it before is not unhelpful either.
And I really feel you, Michael, because I also moved abroad. I was born in Turkey. I understand how difficult it can be when you move abroad to new culture, new language. In Dubai, people speak Arabic as well, right? So yes. It's a quite different dynamic, different cultures, and as an hospitality professional, I think it takes really courage and passion to go to another part of the world to manage a business. Must be a great experience from my perspective, but I can understand that there were some obstacles.
It is, but if anyone has the chance to do it, feels free to do it, one thing I can promise them is that you're going to learn by it, even if you learnt you didn't like it. And even if you learn, you'll never do it again, right? It doesn't matter a bit. It really doesn't. But you are going to be richer for that experience because of what you do know. And as we said before, what you don't know. Because actually knowing what you don't know is kind of helpful in life anyway. Not a bad thing to have up your sleeve.
Michael, with your extensive experience, what are the top 3 strategies you would recommend to someone aspiring to achieve a similar career success in the hospitality and tourism industry?
I suppose the first thing I would ask them, are they really comfortable in it? It wasn't something they just fell into, or, and does the background you've had give you sufficient for the job you're anticipating taking? Now, it doesn't mean to say you're going to know it all, and there's going to be lots of questions out there, but still, do you have the basic core understanding of what's...
Can you tell me a little bit more about the core?
Yeah, if you're taking on a new enterprise, the concept of actually facing new people, developing new plans, whether it's a human resources plan, whether it's a sales and marketing plan, whether it's the finance plan that goes with it, it doesn't matter. But the fact is, you need to have in your mind a fundamental understanding that it's going to look like this when it's done, and it's going to play this part. That what I'm doing is a part that's leading to the final result. It's not something out there because I thought it was a good thing to do, but it's an essential ingredient. And those essential ingredients all get cooked together in the end, and you end up with the finished result. So yes, understanding that is a great way of starting. But your question was? Top
2 strategies you would recommend to someone aspiring to achieve a similar career. But I think your first point is to understand, to analyze if your goal, or if it's a job application, or if it's a job opportunity, or if it's a different industry. I think your point is number 1 strategy is to understand if it's a good fit for you.
And then the other thing would be helpful is, how well do you know the people you're going to be working with, and how well do you know the people you're going to be relying upon There you are in another country. So, who are the people in the other country that you are going to be relying upon very heavily for their support and for information and generally to will be a huge deciding factor on success. So you need to actually do some research. Okay, and the company you're working with, are they going to support you? Are they, because times aren't always great. Things do go awry. And if they do they have your back? Because if you take an opening period, it isn't all wonderful. There are days that are great. I always joke that I never worked a day in my life. Well, I never felt I worked a day in my life. But there are certainly days which I'm sure are less memorable or less desirable to remember than others. So do you know the people who are going to shape the success all around you? Because if you don't, you better do some research and get finding out.
So to analyze if the job is a good fit for you, and also to analyze and research about your company and the team you will be working.
Yep.
And what is the third strategy you would recommend to someone pursuing to achieve a similar success?
If you need to be demanding at all, is that you may well be the person who's picking the team, the executive team, the senior team, the supervisory team, and all the rest. And in some of these hotels, that can be an awful lot of people. And you need to consider very seriously, as you look to the senior ranks, are these people going to be capable of doing their job? Because if they're not capable of doing their job, if they're not tried and trusted somewhere else, or known to you in one way or another, and they fall short, you're a long way from home. So if you look at some of the openings and some of the people who've had difficulties, it's because the team assembled just didn't have sufficient bench strength. And this is where the person in charge, whatever title you want to give them, really needs to be quite tough, because it is the people right the way through the organization that are going to make them break it. And it'll be you who decide who those people are ultimately. And you may need to be very definite on the quality and caliber you're looking for. Because if it falls short, your life could end up by being quite unpleasant, downright miserable, in fact, if those key people can't be effective. So that'll be something you will be looking at very strongly. I've had to assemble teams in so many locations, and that has been an enormously taxing. Recruitment has been a very taxing issue, and it's so important to actually get it right.
Thank you, Michael. So how do you set and achieve your goals? Because I know that a lot of young professionals, students, or people who are not sure about how to set and achieve goals are looking for information from a professional like yourself. So how do you set your goals and achieve your goals?
There's countless
Where to start, basically?
There's countless books written on objective setting and goal setting, and some of them are actually quite good, especially in near-term goals. You may want, in this fast-moving world, to separate near goals, immediate goals, short-term goals, from longer-term goals. I mean, as it is, ultimately, the combination of short-term goals, either succeeded or failed, will determine, to a large extent, the longer-term goals. For people now to look out in this ever-changing environment over the long term, I think is an exercise in futility. I can't see, could they have guessed what that motor car 55 years ago was going to look like today? No, of course, no one could. No one could. And even if you go back to the showroom 10, 15 years ago, it's all changed. So you can only control what is in your immediate sphere of influence. In the term, and that the combination of the successes of that shorter term objective setting will, of course, focus your longer ones, because as you work your way through these shorter term ones, the longer ones become more self-apparent, because you will see how markets are changing. You will see how technology is changing, which you couldn't have done a year ago or whatever. Artificial intelligence is a great one. It's being talked about so much now, but was it talked about so much 2 to 3 years ago? No. So now all these things come into your scope of thinking. Having your time planned out well is actually great, because if not, things get a bit sloppy. And there is very important to pull yourself up and say, you know, this is really what I've got on my focus. This is what I'm going to do. And if you can master nowadays some of those shorter term goals and really get them nailed down, and achieve what you've got in mind, the longer term ones, which you have less and less control over, will actually crystallize as you go along.
So it is important to keep up with the trends, because the world is changing every day, and it is important to adapt those changes and implement it to your life in your journey to success, because if you don't keep up with the changes, then it will be hard to catch up, right? So the
wider your circle of friends and associates, community of in the hospitality community and non-hospitality community, in fact in any great communities, the more you have, the more valuable that you can, through discussion, draw upon other people's understanding. You learn by listening, not by talking. And if you're in a milieu which has got a lot of other talented people, you know, those trends get exposed through conversation, and that's hugely helpful. I don't see how people can navigate through life now unless they have an understanding of where some of these things are to some extent going to go. Precise answers you won't find, but to be indicative, to give you direction and confidence to move forward, that's valuable.
I know that when we talk about success, we need to talk about obstacles, because I cannot separate from one to another. In order to be successful in life, we will always have to face obstacles in life. I'm sure you have undoubtedly faced numerous obstacles in your life. Can you tell me what was the biggest obstacle in your life, and what did you learn from it? Or how did you manage it? How did you overcome that obstacle?
You know, I'd love to give you some concrete examples of this tremendous obstacle that presented itself. And then I came like a hero to the rescue, right? And I dealt with all the issues, and the obstacle was defeated and it went away. I'm not sure that's how it is, actually. Of course there are days in our working career where we're faced with things that simply have to be done, which weren't planned. And that's very often seen as an obstacle. Something happens that wasn't planned. It could be an operational issue. It could be a personal issue. It could be a family issue. It wasn't planned. You didn't know about it. You find yourself facing it now. And really how you deal with that is going to be whether you're regarded as an obstacle tackler or not. Most people have to tackle all these obstacles, and certainly senior management has to tackle these things. And that's where you go back to that team you have, your key team of people. Because most of the obstacles I can remember operationally were ones where the team got together and we kind of thrashed it out. And between however big the team was at the time, that answer was infinitely better than if I'd sat down and done it on my own. So I can only tell you that you need to surround yourself with other people with whom you can review these difficulties and obstacles and come up with a solution that works for your organization.
So are you saying that is it good to view them as an obstacle, or we should not take them as obstacles?
No, I think you say, here is something totally unexpected that has come up, and this is not good. We don't want this to happen, right? This is if this happens, it's not good. It's bad, and for the reasons we know and understand. So now, okay, How are we going to handle it? What are we going to do about it? And then, of course, as you work your way through it, as you break it down collaboratively and you work your way through it, a problem shared is a problem halved.
So thinking about our personal lives, can we apply the same strategy to our personal lives in terms of when we have an obstacle? Are you saying that it is important to have support in our circle, people?
Definitely. No man, excuse the gender bit here. No man is an island, I think was the old expression. Or no one is unto themselves. Mm-hmm. Of course not. And especially if you're in a different country, in a different space, feel quite lonely. Mm-hmm. Can feel quite, oh my gosh, all the familiar faces that you might have had at one time just simply aren't readily available anymore, owing to distance. So the people that you've selected to work with you take an even greater importance. Because it's interesting when people are getting an award of something, and it doesn't matter whether it's the Eurovision Song Contest or whether it's a hotel award, they immediately start talking about they owe their success to the team, right? Who do they thank? They thank the people that worked around them. Well, that is in the main how problems get overcome. Unlikely it's just one person doing it on their own in a vacuum. That is a form of reverse dictatorship, and I doubt whether it has a plan for long-term success.
Given your roles in opening many hotels, consulting hotels and management companies, and I also do know that you have been working as a counselor in the municipality of the...
I was a municipal councillor. I did 2 terms for 8 years, and that was a wonderful learning experience. 8 years was enough, 2 4-year terms was enough, and I decided, somewhat encouraged by my significant other, not to do another 4 years, and I think that was a good decision. But that was an incredible learning experience.
So given your experience and background, what qualities do you believe that are essential for effective leadership?
Gosh, I should have come here with this library of books written about leadership. Do you know, it's interesting, if you look up the word to lead in the dictionary, it reads something to take someone by the hand and guide them. If you actually pick up one of the, I looked at a rather old dictionary.
Yes.
I forget whether it was the Oxford Dictionary. And I actually did look as well. There's all this stuff about leadership. You know, people make careers about talking about leaderships. In the main, it's a wonderful cure for insomnia. I can't think of anything more boring than to hear someone spouting out about leadership. And there's nuggets, of course, of great wisdom amongst them, I must say. But the actual classic definition of lead is to actually take someone by the hand and guide. And that's, in a way, you may not be taking them by the physical hand and guide, but you are actually taking them and showing them.
Mm-hmm. And I think there is more to think about your statement, because when you say guiding someone or taking their hand to guide someone, that means you are being there for that person. I think when we apply that to a business, and I know from my experience too that they think that they lead you, but actually they don't lead you because you don't even see them. There is no connection between you and them. And I know from operational perspective, some people like to stay in their offices. They don't even go and say hi to their employees, and they don't connect with them.
Well, it depends what job. One of the very best financial controllers I ever had in a hotel came to me and said, I hate people. He said, I don't want to have anything to do with them. He said, I'm here, and he said, and if people irritate me, I'll just put a rude sign on the door encouraging them to stay away. Now, in fact, he wasn't like that. It was a gentleman in this case. He wasn't like that in truth. So it's what that old expression, horses for courses. In his role, he was incredibly effective and very, very dynamic. But at times he came across as utterly gruff and disinterested in the rest of humanity, which, by the way, wasn't again entirely fair, because that's not true. So it depends. He certainly was no comedian, I can tell you. But if you had an issue, a serious issue, or one that needed complex breaking down, thinking through in its component parts, that was the man you wanted at your side. Probably not your best dinner party companion, but there you go.
When I say work and life balance, the first thing comes to my mind is mental health. I know how important mental health is to be successful in our daily lives, or not even successful, to survive. I think we need to have a good mental health to enjoy the life. And I know work can be challenging sometimes. Over workload can be challenging sometimes. So given your experience and all the responsibilities you had in your life, I know you didn't have only one responsibility, you had too many responsibilities, including family responsibilities, including your work responsibilities, maybe multiple work responsibilities at the same time. So my question to you is, yes, how have you managed to maintain your work and life balance?
I'm not sure I have, actually. I always looked at it as having so much fun. I never worked a day in my life. So in some ways, what I was doing in the evening was just merely an extension of my work during the day. It was hugely social sometimes, or one was in a very public relations environment or very public environment, and the day work, the evening work, just all seemed to blend to me, because because I was basically enjoying it so much, or so committed to it. It never occurred to me. Probably. In some roles, if people are working desperately long hours, which can be an industry trap, and they don't have the support, which means because you shouldn't be working desperately long hours just because it's desperately long. It means there's something wrong. There is something seriously wrong if people don't have it. It's no good complaining about it. If you don't have it, then you really, really need to assess the structure that surrounds you. And why is it not supporting you better so it can give you more free time, more time to do other things, more time to grow in other ways? I hate to say it, but it's really down to you, You can't blame the industry. If you haven't got work-life balance, the only person you've got to look to is yourself. It's no good looking to someone else. There's no miracle solutions out there. Either you can work your way into a situation where you're better supported, better helped, and therefore more free time, etc., or you're just going to carry on doing the same old thing and be miserable and complain about work-life balance. It is a new language. People talking. You mentioned mental health. I hope people watching this would forgive me to say that I don't think we ever talked about mental health. I don't think it wasn't in our vocabulary.
That's true.
It's something that's come to the fore now and much spoken about. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't be, and maybe it's an excellent thing that it is. We didn't. We had a job to do. You either got on and succeeded, or you went and did something else. I don't think there was a great deal of empathy in terms of whether it was damaging your mental health. If it was damaging your mental health, probably people then would have said, somewhat gruffly, that, well, you better go and do something else then. It was this whole language has come up more recently. I struggle with it. Now, if people have something serious, they need. This is not what we're talking about here. Something that needs absolute medical or psychological help. That is not the issue here. But just day to day, if the job is too much of a strain, refocus the job, reorganize the job so it becomes more of a pleasure. And if the job isn't a pleasure, go do something else, or change the job so it becomes a pleasure.
The answer is in you, right? You just need to find it.
No one's going to do it for you.